Stephanie, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I've got kind of a storied path. I started in finance. I did navigate after about 7 years in that to a different software service company, a music licensing firm. And I did that for about 5 years. And then I ended up in hospitality. I've been for the last 4.5 years for Kasa. So a very crooked path. I don't know how I got to hospitality for music licensing, but that's where I've ended up. So I've got a pretty varied portfolio, I guess.
I mean, I'm the same. I mean, I never worked in hospitality or human resources SaaS technology in my life before I've ended up working here. So it's very much been a very steep learning curve, and I'm kind of glad that I found myself into sort of this like culture of hospitality, because I feel like better talking about it every day versus every other industry I've been in. It's the most human centric sort of space I think you could possibly find yourself in. I think when it comes to like, say, I'm curious just like about like, when you say like launch ops, for example, like what does that necessarily mean? You're responsible for that.
Yeah, so as we talked about, could mean anything, but for Casa, so my team is responsible for actually launching our property. So whatever goes into making a property go from zero to hero, what to get it live. So anything you can think of, kind of like what you do home, you create the designs, you order the furniture, you hire the installers and the movers, anything that sort of do to prepare a property to go live. That is what my team does.
Wow. And so when I think about that and you like have a property, and I know you got a bunch, I just moved from San Francisco, from the Bay Area myself. So I know that you have a bunch of them there as well, which is like pretty awesome. And I'm pretty sure I will go stay in one when I am back there. Tell me, on this side, on sort of the human side of this, it's like, how do you corral a group of people to like make these sort of projects happen? Like, do you work with like sort of contractors, freelancers, hourly workers to make these kind of properties stand up, or like what's the sort of like human process here?
Yeah, it's looked really different from when I started at Casa to now. And it's a little bit of everything. It's sort of an all hands on deck approach. Sometimes if we have enough lead time that we can contract a designer, a third party designer that's really going to, create a high-end theme and a lot of uniqueness to a property, we'll go with a third party contractor. Sometimes we have to take over a property in 2 weeks. We don't have the luxury of the back and forth with a contracted designer, and we do have team in-house with that background. And so we'll rely on that. Just using design as an example, we'll lean on them. Hey, can you pick out some of these of our standards, but can you pick out some specific designs for this property? And so we'll get scrappy and go in-house too. So it becomes things.
And because I know that it's kind of like a virtual kind of concept, in the sense that when I say virtual, what I mean is like, it's not like a traditional sort of vacation or short long-term kind of stay facility. It can be kind of, as long as like, you got your apartments, you've got the kind of quasi hotel kind of spaces. How do you like even like staff those? Do you have like ancillary staff that like work and manage those sort of properties, clean them, deal with all that kind of stuff? Is that also within the Casa as well, or do you guys like completely outsource that?
Yeah, and that also can look different property to property. Some we do have to have more full-time staffing just because of how the property is set up or the type of clientele that might visit, like more international. But we always have some sort of dedicated staff. It's never totally, it's never like free of somebody on site working physically. We will sometimes contract, we'll sometimes have a full in-house hire, but we always have someone checking in on the property physically and helping guests in some way or another when needed.
Yeah, amazing. And it's interesting, like I've interviewed a bunch of, say, hotels and resorts on this sort of podcast, and one of the questions I always ask them is like sort of the challenges they have in terms of like launching them. And I'm curious your take on like sort of the kind of main challenges on launching a new one, because I will then explain what I mean after your answer. But I'm curious, like when you like launch a new like sort of location, like what are sort of the key challenges that you face?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's one we ask every time we get a new property. What are the changes we're going to face on this one? And I think what we look at is we kind of get a case study of the property. Has it been has it been empty? Do we need to look at the mechanics of the property? That can be a major challenge for us when we're taking over a boutique hotel, for example. Is there going to be this multifamily property? Are we going to have residents, full-time residents on site that are going to be upset about our presence there? And so we kind of look at the profile of each property and figure out
Yeah.
early on in our due diligence phase, what are our challenges going to be here? What is our game plan to address those challenges? And we try to do that really pre-sign or right at sign,
Yeah.
that go in and into the launch already prepared and already with a game plan.
Well, what's interesting, I mean, and it's a very unique product you have because that's such a unique, bespoke sort of like location by location sort of challenge. Like when I talk to people who are in like resorts, who would have like multiple locations and be, director of talent at, you know, some resort chain, for example. One of the things I hear again and again is that in sort of this post-COVID sort of world, that there's kind of like there's like a guest experience challenge, which is basically like people's expectations are so massive now post-COVID, but there's such a human resource issue in terms of getting people that are good enough to be at the resort at the times they need them to be. For example, the one I hear all the time from people, and I'm sure you've heard this, is a night manager. And like one of the things in all the hotels I speak to is like, how do we find that person? And that goes to like designing for that person, like who is the prototypical night manager, which is a very unique kind of role and position. And I'm curious, do you come across kind of challenges like that as well from a human resource perspective, as much as like the actual physical of the launch?
Yeah, 100%. And I'm not comparing Casa to Disney in any way.
Oh, no.
uh, we want to get there eventually to that level, but I do think there's one thing with Casa like Disney really focuses on, which is like the quality of the people, and they want it to match their brand and how they present themselves. And that is very much something that's important to Casa and to us when we hire team members, is if they're going to interact with guests or property owners or whoever, are they coming across like we want them to? Are they
Yeah.
strong work ethic? Are they kind? Just basic good human qualities,
Yeah.
and just people who want to work, good strong work ethic. And it is hard to find people post COVID that align with your branding and will speak to guests and partners how, our CEO, or how I would speak to them. So yeah, it's been a major challenge, and just night shift, really any shift that we're trying to fill. And so I think we've tried to really nail our interviewing process
Yeah.
to find the people, but it is hard. And I definitely have seen a change in that since COVID.
Well, I'll definitely send you the episode I recorded with the head of talent at the Minna Restaurant Group. They're in San Francisco. They're like multiple locations, and he was very articulate about like how they very specifically look for very talented individuals and how they would interview like 100 people to get that one person. So it's
Yes.
like a very intensive process. But it's actually interesting because what you're saying, there's like, how do we find that person? I had the director of hotel operations at a man group. I'm not sure you come across them. They're like Amangiri in Arizona. It's a very plush wedding, sort of beautiful kind of venue. They have a bunch of them, one in New York, Dubai, all that kind of stuff. And here's French, and we were chatting, and I was like, how do you find that person to be in that hotel? Because that's like a 5-star, like very premium, and like that expectation level is like to the roof from the guests. Because obviously you expect them to like, you know, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Like behind a knee, or what's the like cap and whatever the phrase is. You expect like the guest experience is so high, or the guest expectation. And I was like, how would you define the type of person you're looking for there? And he actually says something very insightful. He's like, service can be trained. You can train people with service. But because he was French, we laughed, and I said, is it a certain je ne sais quoi that you look for in people, And he was laughing. He's like, that's
Yeah.
exactly it. It's like, and I'm always curious, especially for people in hospitality, and especially in people who are doing, like, say, more than restaurants, which is obviously like, staying where people can put their head down. And I always think of like somebody comes in late at night at 3 o'clock in the morning with a baby crying, and it's like, how does a facility think of that situation and deliver the best experience possible? And so obviously you're looking for the best people to manage that. What are the sort of intangibles that you look for in people when it comes to hiring for like the best?
I think, I kind of said it earlier, and I know it sounds kind of cheesy, but honestly, like kindness and passion, because you are working with people, whether, and remotely, you're working with a team remotely, and that's challenging. And then you're working with guests. And so I think just having compassion for people, having a passion for people, and it's just not something that you can train. That's just something that's ingrained in people or not. And if you know how to identify that in an interview, let me know. Or if you have a question for identifying that. But I think it's compassion, it's work ethic, and it's just these human qualities that I think you try to identify in the interviewing process. And I'm digging crazy over. I was just trying to kind of identify those really strong positive human qualities that is going to be interacting with your guests.
Totally. And it's interesting because it's not cringy to say it, it's just so hard to articulate it. And I think that's the thing when it comes to hospitality, and especially for people like you in positions of leadership, it's like, how do we articulate exactly what we're looking for beyond simply it's hard to describe, but you know it when you see it. And I think that's the sort of like position you and your peers are in, where it's like, how do we find great people? How do we put them? And it's not just literally necessarily in like an hourly perspective. We're talking, like from hourly workers to contracted managerial positions to in the corporate position itself. It's like, leadership stems to the top. Like there's no getting away from the fact that like, if you don't have good leaders, it's not going to work. I one of the things I've noticed speaking to lots of your peers and I actually had director of operational excellence at Dave and Buster's on this podcast, and he made a great, it was great, and he talked about like, entertainment meets food, and it's like we're kind of like, there's nothing patentable about that. You know what I mean? Like what they're offering is not, but why do people go? And why is there 150 of them? And probably the second biggest chain of sort of entertainment / food could be 5 or 10 in any place. Like how did they get to that type of scale? And we spoke a lot about like, say, culture and how COVID was a giant reset for culture for them in terms of like, how do we like appropriately recognize the staff that work in their facilities. And I'm curious, your take on sort of like culture at Kasa and across the board, and how do you think about how it kind of starts at the top and trickles down, and how people feel like a sense of like belonging at Kasa?
Yeah, it's such a great question, especially post-COVID. Culture is so important, and also especially in a remote company where you just have these little moments to connect or to capture that culture, share that culture. And so one of the things that I think that Casa does well, so we do have a biweekly all hands, and in every one of those, there's a section of it that our CEO speaks, to the company about different things, but especially around culture. And he tries to express what our culture is, what our goals are as a company, and make sure that everyone sees that he believes them, he lives them, and that everyone that kind of reports up to him is in the same boat, believes the same set of cultures, believes our values. What are our Casa values? How are we accomplishing those in what we do? I think one of the biggest pieces of Casa culture is just around working together, like great cross-functional communication and collaboration. I've seen some of our competitors kind of flounder and all trying to have their own initiatives, and they kind of go against each other. And we always emphasize that we all have the same goal, and we have different, check boxes that we're trying to get done to reach that goal. But we always try to come back together, like we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. We all want to open this property. I want this property to operate well, do well. And so we try to continually connect with each other cross-functionally and make sure, like, aligned on the Kasa values and collaborating.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing. And again, it's like, when you say it and you hear yourself say it and everything is like, so yeah, duh, in the sense that you're like, of course. But then you guys, how many locations do you have now? I see the map of the United States is littered with K's on your website. So like, again, there's more to it than like good collaboration. You know what I mean? In the sense that like, there's obviously like a secret sauce in your culture that's enabling and empowering you guys. Like, what do they say? Like, culture eats process for breakfast. I like that phrase because I feel like when I speak to successful individuals like you, it's like when you try to like articulate it yourself, yeah, we're really good, we have good stand-ups, and it's like, yes, like they exist. Do you know what I mean? But like, you guys are like a runaway train success. You know what I mean? It's not like you're 5 locations. I can't even, the map is so littered that I honestly can't even tell. Like, is it like, how many am I looking at here? It's like, I'm so zoomed in. It's like amazing. It's incredible, the kind of growth that you guys have had over the last couple of years. And I mean, you've been there for that entire growth period. So I would say a lot of kudos to you, Stephanie, in terms of like making that happen. Like, how many like locations have you like personally launched or been part of?
Of the current portfolio, all of them.
Yeah, like, I mean, that's unbelievable. I mean, you must be an unbelievable person to work with. Like, you absolutely bring it. That's like, like I said, there's nothing patentable about the actual idea itself. Like, tomorrow somebody could look at like this model and go, we want to do that, but like, they're not gonna. You know what I mean? It's like you're like laser focused. If there's one thing about the Kasa experience for people, what is the one thing that people say time and time again that was something about Kasa is why they think it's amazing?
I think it's our resourcefulness. And I think that it kind of answers both the front end and the back end, why we're successful. For partners, we're resourceful. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes they just need somebody to take over in quick order. You take this property over in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks. Yes, we can. We'll figure out how we're going to do it, and we do it well. But we have to get resourceful. And the same with guests. If something's going wrong, if the guest is having a bad experience, or if tech is malfunctioning, as tech likes to do at 1 a.m. at the worst times, it's just the resourcefulness of our team members. I think that's probably one of the number one qualities we have in our team is just kind of digging down deep. Like, okay, it's not going to be the perfect cookie cutter solution, but we can figure out an answer and we'll make it work. And in a way that's effective, and not in a shady way. Not like, there's also like shady ways to get things done. There's ways that are less optimal, but we always find like the best solution. We know how to kind of get creative and find an answer. So I think it's our resourcefulness that has allowed us to grow.